start the meeting. We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I think we're waiting for Councillor Buston, aren't we, Matthew?
Yes, he's just been delayed. Hopefully we'll be with us shortly.
Okay, we're going to hold for a few seconds. I can do the welcome introduction, I guess, now, and then allow Councillor Buston to join at that time, probably. That's probably the best way. Unless you think he's going to be a few minutes, Matthew.
I think probably carry on with the welcome announcements, Chair.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a warm welcome to you all for this online meeting on the Wednesday, the 24th of March 2021. I am Councillor Dave Harris. I'm the Councillor for Beerchurch Ward, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. This meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom on the internet and on the Council's YouTube channel, and will also be available to watch afterwards. To begin with, there are a few matters of housekeeping. With the exception of the Democratic Services Officer advising us, would participants all please mute their microphones unless they are invited to speak. I will ask for each item of business to be presented and then ask each member of the panel in turn if they wish to ask a question or to comment on the matter. At the end of each item of business, I'll ask each panel member in turn to confirm audibly how they wish to vote. We may have a break at 7:30, subject to the progress of the meeting. And I'm now going to ask each panel member, please, to confirm their name and that they understand the procedures for the meeting. And the first panel member I'd ask you in alphabetical order is Councillor Barton.
Who's muted?
Apologies, can't unmute after all this time. Councillor Lynn Barton, Shrub End Ward, and yes, understood.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Buston? Not here yet? No, okay. Councillor Helen Chua?
Thank you. Councillor Helen Chua for St Anne's and St John's Ward, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Crowe?
Councillor Simon Crowe, Castle Ward, understood.
Councillor John Elliott?
Sorry, Councillor Elliott, Tiptree Ward. Yeah, I understood in the end.
Thank you. Councillor Patricia Moore?
Councillor Patricia Moore, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward, understood.
Thank you. Councillor Beverley Oxford?
Councillor Beverley Oxford, Highwards Ward, understood. Thank you.
Councillor Barbara Wood?
Councillor Barbara Wood, Tiptree Ward, understood.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Young?
Councillor Tim Young, Greenstead Ward, all fully understood. Thank you.
Thank you. And my Deputy Chair, Councillor Mike Hogg.
Good evening, Chairman. Councillor Mike Hogg, St Anne's and St John's Ward, understood.
Thank you. We're now waiting to see if Councillor Buston is here yet and got in, because he's had difficulties in joining.
Yeah, he's not with us yet, but my colleague is on the phone with him as we speak, and we'll try and get him in as soon as we can.
Right. Okay, well, the next thing for me to do, I'll come back to Roger Buston in a few moments, is item 2, substitutions on the agenda. And as far as I understand, if you could confirm that all committee members are here except for Roger Buston, that nobody is absent and there's no substitutions.
Yeah, everyone is here, Chair. There are no subs this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 3, members, urgent items, and there are no urgent items scheduled for this meeting. Item 4, I will invite councillors now to declare any interests for any items that are on the agenda, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Can I ask anybody to put their hand up if they feel they've got an interest to declare? I see no hands.
Councillor Elliott, Chair, is indicating.
Councillor Elliott?
Yes, I don't know whether it is or not, but I do own a caravan on a site up in Norfolk that is also run by Park Dean. So whether this puts me off or not, I don't know.
I think that the Democratic Service Officer advised, but I think that's non-pecuniary. Matthew?
Yes, you're right, Chair. Non-pecuniary, you can remain in the meeting, Councillor Elliott, but I'll note it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for declaring that. That's very wise. Thank you. No other indications? And we're still waiting for Councillor Buston.
Yeah, he's continuing to have issues, Chair, I'm afraid. He'll be with us as soon as possible.
Right. Okay. Well, I think I can go on to item 6, Matthew, because there is a registration for a general have your say from Mr. Alan Moggeridge, who wants to speak to the committee about boatman licenses. So this is item 6, and I'll now introduce Alan Moggeridge and introduce himself. And I'll explain, Alan, you'll have 3 minutes to have your say to get, and we've seen your correspondence. So if you like to unmute yourself, and then Matthew Evans, the Democratic Services, would time you, starting from when you speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Right. So when do I start?
No, sir.
Now, well, good evening, councillors. Thank you for listening to me. The Packing Shed Trust was formed to preserve the Victorian oyster packing shed, a part of Colchester's oystering heritage. It's on a small island in Mersey Harbour. It is the only one left of its type in Britain. Part of the remit of our charitable trust is to inform Colcestrians about this part of their local history. Now, to raise money to achieve this, we take people out in our launches. We ask for a small donation to cover costs. The launches are licensed to CBC's exacting standards. The licensing department thinks we are a commercial venture. We are not, we're a charity. Nobody gets paid, we are all volunteers. We've got 10 launch drivers to cover our bookings. We are open for less than 6 months of the year. Larger groups such as families, schools, artists, photographers, etc., and bird watchers pay a little bit more in a donation to hire the whole shed itself. But all the money goes to maintain the shed and the launches. Last year, the licensing department asked us to acquire Boatmans licenses for each driver at £75 each, since reduced, thank goodness, and to obtain a medical certificate. Even the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency doesn't require as much for our waters. Mr. John Ruder was helpful from the department, licensing department, was helpful in giving us the name of a local surgery who would help us with the medical certificates. The doctor I spoke to admitted it was just a box ticking exercise, and they would charge us £115 for each driver. We do take health and safety extremely seriously, and each driver self-certificates informally to me as the chairman of the Packing Shed Trust. I was a driver, but took myself off the roster following a stroke. Drivers are always on radio contact with the other launch and the yacht club launch. Mr. Ruder told me that CBC was following the example of other local authorities and issuing Boatman's licenses. I spoke to Malden and they do not issue them, and tendering charges £54, but waive the fee for charities. They also ask drivers to medically self-certificate, which of course is free. You see my dilemma. In 2019, we raised £3,000 to safeguard future operations, and to pay nearly £1,500 to get Boatman's licenses would force us to close, basically. All we're asking for is for CBC to treat us, our charity, in a similar manner to tendering, and to accept medical self-certification also. We appreciate that CBC reduced the license fee for this year, but we need further help if the charity is to continue. Part of Colchester's cultural heritage is at risk, and it would be a tragedy to lose a legacy of this important local industry, which is justly celebrated annually at the Colchester Oyster Feast. We do all of this work for Colchester at no cost to CBC, I might add. Thank you for your time, all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Moggeridge. I'll invite John Ruder, the licensing manager, to respond.
Hello, Councillor Harris and committee. Yeah, it's true. We have been in consultation with each other over a number of months in relation to the medicals, and I can't comment on tendering or Malden, but I did do research with Southend, Castle Point, Ipswich, and other councils in relation, and they do charge for a boatman licence. I don't quite know why it's £115. I can't really comment on the medicals because obviously that's outside the remit. That's what we request. The other place I did suggest contacting would have been Cotswold Medicals, who charge £60 for a Group 2 medical, which is the same as what you would require for this. Again, the fees are set for this year, and it's out. I can't really look at it again until September at the very earliest in that terms, because that's when the fee cycle comes round again. I guess it's open to questions on the floor with the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members wish to comment? Councillor Buston. Good evening, Councillor Buston. Could you introduce yourself first, please? Right, you need to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Buston. Could you introduce yourself first?
Yes, hello, good evening. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, for being late. My normal computer is not working for whatever reason, and I don't know why that is. I'm on a TSB computer that's just to the side of my desk. My name's Roger Buston. I'm a Borough Councillor for Colchester representing Crittygate Ward, and I've sat on the licensing committee for many years. Can you still hear me?
Yes, very much so.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. That's good. Again, my apologies for lateness. It's something to do with the why I can't connect. I did look before at a note that was kindly sent to me by Mr. Mogridge, and thank you very much indeed for that. And I do understand, having been a resident of Colchester and in fact using Mersey a lot, and having been to the packing shed on a number of occasions, I do understand entirely where you're coming from and why. And I think most of the committee also do. There does appear to be some difficulty in regard to exactly what needs to be achieved in relation to the licence. We are nonetheless, as a committee, governed by the safety requirement. The safety requirement is absolute, and providing that is not compromised, then other items, as indeed Mr. Reader has suggested, can be looked into to see whether or not there is any leeway that can be sought there. I do understand where the trust is coming from. When you're asking volunteers to do something, it's not very easy just to order people to do something for whatever reason. When people are doing something for nothing, as most people in relation to items such as this are, then it's very difficult to tell them what they've got to do and how they've got to pay a lot of money in order to be able to carry out their charitable function. My biggest concern in this is the safety aspect, and I could not agree to medical self-certification, I'm afraid, as a concept when you are conducting passengers either for hire, reward, cost or otherwise. I do think that that does need to be an absolute, however it's dealt with, and I'm most grateful for the officers for trying to find a way of making this a cheaper exercise. And I think Mr. Ruder mentioned Cotswold as a possible venue for obtaining a cheaper medical certification. So I think this needs to be explored further. Certainly we need to see why there is discrepancy between the various licensing officers, authorities as to what they charge. And that's a good point he's brought up there. But nonetheless, whatever we do and whatever we charge, even if it's done for nothing, the safety aspect, I'm afraid, as far as I'm concerned, cannot be compromised. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buston. I next have Councillor Young.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm very interested in what Councillor Buston had to say. I've got a lot of sympathy with that and with what Mr. Mogridge had to say. I hope we can find a compromise here. It does seem that I don't want to see this charity penalised in any way, shape or form. I think they're doing a great job. As Alan said, this is unique and we ought to be supporting it. So I hope Mr. Ruder can come back with a compromise suggestion that will allow the volunteers to continue the charity doing the excellent service, the excellent work that they're doing, which all adds to the traditions and history of our brilliant and historic borough. And my sympathies lie with the charity and the efforts that they go to continue this service. So I hope we can have something before us fairly soon that will enable us to support the charity as best we can.
Thanks to Councillor Young. Councillor Patricia Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm slightly at odds. I am absolutely with the Packing Shed Trust, and knowing the nature of these medical certificates, they are very little better than somebody honestly self-certifying. And the same thing goes to the medical certificate. If you're asked a question and you answer it dishonestly, well, the certificate is not worth the paper that it's written on or the money that it's being paid for. So I would trust the drivers of these boats to be honest. And the waters are very safe there. So it's not as if you're in a raging torrent now to sea. In fact, it's probably safer than the rest of tendering. So tendering feel that they can do the self-certification. I think that Colchester can. Yeah, I think we should as soon as possible, get this sorted out, because the difference between a paid-for medical certificate and a self-certification there's no cost to the council to say, no, you don't have to pay a medical professional to tick the piece of paper. And I think, quite honestly, seeing the job that they do and the work they put into it, we should do everything in our power to assist them. And if that means following the same route that tendering has done, I would, when this comes to the committee to make a decision, that would be my choice. And I hope others might agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. I'm blessed with the portfolio holder, Councillor Mike Lilly, present, and he's just put his hand up. Could we hear from Councillor Mike Lilly, please?
Oh yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Mike Lilly here, portfolio holder for licensing and public safety. And I spoke to Mr. Mogridge at all. We've been involved in this coverage. It was quite interesting to delve into it. Never had this before over that, but I sympathise with all the volunteers down there. We have worked out a quite good compromise over the fees, which is helping out with that. But the issue is, and Councillor Buston has got this exactly right, I'm afraid, and the biggest issue for me is public safety. We will issue a licence to a group of volunteers that will supply a self-certification to say they're okay, they're fit and healthy. What happens if that person takes a group of tourists out or people out onto the sea? Something happens to him, a tragedy happens. Who's going to be responsible for that? It'll be Colchester Borough Council, because we allowed it to happen over that. And while I appreciate it is a good historical background, we have to look at it as a public safety aspect in this. You might not think it's gone health and safety, gone mad, but I can tell you now, as a portfolio holder, I would not be signing off any policy that says about this, because I would not be held responsible, dragged into a court of law to say, why did you allow this to happen? So that's where I stand on this, and a public safety point of view only. Now, as soon as you grant, if you want to grant a self-certificate signed by these people, yeah, fair enough. Every taxi driver in this district will come forward and say, you're doing it for them. Why do we have to have a medical certificate instead? I volunteer every weekend and I take a group of children down to the seaside. Is that the same? Why do I have to have a medical certificate to say I'm fit, whereas a group of people could go into a boat and take them out to sea? What's the difference between the two? I'm afraid there is no difference. So in my point of view, we hope a compromise will be reached, and the fact that there'll be a medical doctor out there somewhere who will do a really good deal and they'll be able to sign up to it. But I'm afraid that, whereas I'm concerned, and policy-wise, we are where we are, and Councillor Buston and myself are in agreement over this as well. I'm sorry, really sorry to have to say it, but public safety must come first.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lilly. I see Councillor Young wanted to have a second bite. I'll just allow that, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I very hear what Councillor Lilly says, but how do Tendring and Malden get round that then? Because that would presumably their officers would make the same claim and their portfolio holder would have the same concern. So can our officers go and speak to Tendring and Malden to see how they've got round those difficulties, and then we can support the Packing Shed Trust as I think we all want to, as best we can. If there's a way around it and Tendring and Malden have found a way around it, then let's look at that. I know John has spoken to Southend, he said, Castle Point and Ipswich, but let's speak to the ones who do what I think most of us are sympathetic to and want to do, and see how they have managed to do that. Can we ask our officers to do that, please?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Young. I'm going to hand back to John Rue, Licensing Manager, before I let Alan have a second minute that he is entitled to come back. But summarising, John, it looks like there's lots of suggestions there. Good that we've done a cheap licence, but is there any way that yourself and Mr. Mogridge could explore the organisation you talk about for a very much cheaper medical licence would fit the bill and make sure it fits the council's policies?
Thanks, Chair. I have actually emailed Tendring to find out. I'm yet to receive a response. Malden, I can't find much on their website about any information about it, so I will try and speak to my contact there, who's my opposite, hopefully next week, and I can try and see how they go about doing this and how they've I guess interpreted the legislation accordingly.
Thank you. Mr. Mogridge, you see a lot of support there for the principles. We want to protect public, obviously. That's the feeling that Councillor Buston and others have said, but you've got a lot of support in the room for what you do. Did you want to have a further minute to?
Yes, please, just a short time. You can hear me?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. We go out into the harbour. We're never more than about 100 metres away from the shore. We don't go out into the sea. I will tell you that much. Unlike Brightlingsea, who do, of course, go out to the sea, but they still give them a tick box thing, self-certification. We do have public liability insurance, of course, and each passenger is insured up to £1 million in medical costs. That is taken care of as well. And we looked into the Cotswold agency, as Mr. Ruder mentioned, and they're in Cheltenham. Now, the other one he mentioned was Abbeyfield in Colchester, and they said they do it for 115. But the other one in Cheltenham, how are we going to get 10 drivers down to Cheltenham to get medical tests? See my point? We are very pleased with the response of all of the councillors listening and giving their viewpoints. We do understand the safety. Safety is paramount to us. We wouldn't do it if we thought it was unsafe.
Time, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mogridge.
Thank you.
Any final words, Mr. Ruder?
The Cotswold have an office based at Severals. So that's where all the, and if they're not at Severals, then they have an office also in Ipswich. Because obviously they're an online sort of company, and they move to where the appointments are because they do all of Chelmsford's and Colchester's private hire and hackney carriage trade.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruder. And my message as chair to Mr. Mogridge is to explore that avenue and let Mr. Ruder know if you don't get any further with that, please. You've had some good support. So I'll close that item now. Thank you very much, Mr. Mogridge. Could you leave the meeting and be able to watch on YouTube now? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mogridge. Councillors, I'm moving on to item 7 now. Item 7 is the caravan and park homes update. I have 2 public speakers for this item, Councillor Sunnox and Councillor Acker, both who wish to speak to the committee. And the way I understand it, I'll take advice from Democratic Services, the 2 councillors will be allowed to speak before we consider the item.
Yes, that's right, Chair. They'll be entitled to have your say provision of 3 minutes each.
So thank you very much. And I rule that Councillor Sunnox was the first person to wish to speak of committee, so I'm going to give him first bite. Councillor Sunnox, could you introduce yourself first, please? It's the slogan of the year, ladies and gentlemen. You're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I start now?
Could you introduce yourself and then we'll allow you to start, please?
Yeah, I'm Councillor David Sunnox. I'm representing East Mersey Parish Council.
Thank you very much. Would you begin?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address your committee tonight. The subject of permanent residency of caravans in East Mersey is an issue that is raised at almost every parish council meeting and has now been going on for 8 years. There are 3 caravan parks in East Mersey, but I'm only going to talk about Cooper's Beach, as it's the largest park, it has a 12-month licence, and is the only site that operates under licence rather than planning conditions. Cooper's Beach was granted a licence to operate throughout the year in 2013, but with the conditions that it was for holiday purposes only and that there should be no permanent residency. Local residents and the parish council were immediately concerned that this site would become residential. And after engaging with Colchester Borough Council, we were assured by them that the site would be properly monitored. It became immediately clear, however, that the sales team at Cooper's Beach were selling caravans as homes and telling clients that they could live there for 12 months of the year. In January 2014, local residents started conducting traffic surveys of vehicles in and out of Cooper's Beach. January is a time of year when one would not expect many people to be on holiday in a caravan, and the surveys were conducted from 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning. The results of these surveys were staggering, with as many as 40 to 50 vehicles leaving the site, of which a significant number were van or works vehicles. This level of activity could not be argued as normal holiday traffic. The results of these surveys and surveys conducted every year since has been given to Colchester Borough Council, together with other evidence of the illegal occupancy, but the problem continues to this day. We're getting extremely frustrated at the perceived lack of support and action from the Borough Council. Whatever information is given is never quite enough. We fully understand that the evidence needs to be able to stand up in court, but we have seen repeatedly a lack of willingness by the Borough Council to act against Park Dean Resorts, the owners of Cooper's Beach. It is the Borough Council that has the statutory powers to investigate and not a parish council. The evidence is there if the Borough Council chooses to investigate, but all too often it chooses not to. An example of this occurred recently. A local resident on 3 occasions took pictures of the numerous cars parked outside the gates, which were locked to Cooper's Beach during the current lockdown. These pictures were sent to the Borough Council, but we've been told that the Borough Council could not act as there is a public footpath that adjoins the caravan park leading to the sea. These cars could belong to people going on a walk. We do not dispute this argument, but the circumstantial evidence was there for the Borough Council to investigate. No one wants to see people evicted from their place of residence during this pandemic, but it would have been very easy for a council officer to walk around the site in the evening when lights are on and see which caravans had people living in them?
Time, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much for that. We've got the gist of that. Thank you very much. I'll now welcome Councillor Acker to the meeting. If you could introduce yourself, Councillor Acker, and then start, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is John Acker. I'm representing tonight West Mersey Town Council. Firstly, can I thank you for the opportunity of presenting the council's views to the licensing committee. I want to say that I'm grateful since there are very strong views about the caravan licensing in West Mersey, and welcome that the council is giving renewed attention to this matter. I'm very much support what Councillor Sunnox has said on behalf of East Mersey Parish Council. I do so in the belief that that licensing arrangements are not being applied sufficiently for caravan sites on the island. In our view, there is reputational impact does affect the Borough Council, and I make this point very much in agreement with Councillor Sunnox that what measures are being taken into account, it is the perception that considerable abuse is taking place, not only material facts, but perception. I wanted to also say that we welcome your office's report, and there is concern in this respect, since we feel that there is much more abuse based on local experience, which the council should take a view. I'm not here addressing planning issues, of which there are many affecting caravan sites, nor since these can be addressed through planning arrangements and are often done so, nor are we stating issues that principally apply during the lockdown period, but the underlining view. We say that due attention needs to be made to the fact that these caravans are being used as permanent homes. These caravans and lodges do have the facilities of a home. Residents on the sites openly state locally that they have given up their permanent residences for their relatives. Others say that they are noted as leaving sites at regular times and returning at the same times daily. The evidence is that in November 2019, there were a total of over 7,000 registered patients to the local island practice. Of these, 70 registered patients were living on caravan sites on West Mersey. That's 70 registered patients were living on caravan sites on West Mersey. There will be more if East Mersey is included. On Pacific Action, we would welcome the following: the ongoing information by your officers on investigation is given to local councils. This is clearly ongoing, since we note in respect to a number of caravan sites that the information required by the council has not been forthcoming. Secondly, that a new in-depth investigation is undertaken
Chairman,
as soon as possible. Right, I've only got one final thing to say, that the officers make available to the council not solely information put forward by the site owners, but they do their own in-depth investigation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Acker. Thank you very much indeed. Over to you, Mr. Ruder, the licensing manager. Whether you could answer the points made and then present the report. Is that okay to do all that at the same time?
Yes, Councillor. There is rather a lot there, so I'll try and be as helpful as I can. Obviously, the licence that governs all sites on Mersey is the 1960s Act, and it is very limited in what it does. The only condition on there states that it mustn't be their permanent residence on most of the licences. There is a case that there's a number of planning issues, and the licence generally follows what the planning allows. So if a site such as Cooper's Beach is open for 12 months a year, providing that the criteria of the site, that they provide a driving licence, a utility bill and a council tax bill for a fixed main residence is in position, then that's grounds to allow them to stay. If they choose to stay there for 12 years, but they have another 12 months, they're allowed to. It's legally allowed because it's open 365 days a year. Most of the sites, including Cooper's Beach, does shut down for a month, usually in February or March. Every time they have given me information, I do take it seriously and I do investigate, including the car parking at Cooper's Beach over the lockdown period. I generally, the information they provide me is more of a cue for me to go and have a look. And I do go and have a look. And I did write to Cooper's Beach and ask about the vehicles being parked on site. And yes, they came back and said that some of the people are using the public footpath, which is correct, and they're not prepared to police that, which I would agree that they can't. And they did say that maybe some of them were probably using it to park and go to their caravans and carry out maintenance. All sites were shut at certain periods of the lockdown period. However, obviously under the COVID regulations, there were 10 exceptions that allowed people to remain on site. And that could be one of the exceptions, for example, was that if you were there prior to the lockdown, you could stay there. That was one of the exceptions to the rule. If you couldn't return to your home, you could stay there. If you had illness or recovery from an operation, you could stay there. There were many exceptions that allowed people to stay there. However, lockdown did present an opportunity to look at the sites in terms of closure because of the COVID, so people weren't there. So I did do a project. I have written to all of them, and I did visit every single site and walk around and look at the caravans and picked in excess of 150 caravans to investigate. I have also been back in the lockdown and looked at the paperwork to those caravans that I picked where I believe they were suspected of living on site. Where I was not satisfied that the evidence provided to me was good enough, I asked them to investigate further. And obviously the report I gave today is basically an update of the information. I can't give you the detail because of there's protection with regards to the various sites, but all the places that I looked at, they have given me a report back on every one, and where they have legitimately found that the evidence suggests that they're staying there without another property, they've been removed or asked to leave. I can't do any more than that because I am following the rules of what I'm allowed to work in. I think there needs to be a bit of work done in terms of probably providing the policy, so it makes it very clear what I can and can't do as an officer, or more to the point, what the council can and can't do in authority. Because I'm not adverse to the issues that are going on, and I am very aware about what has happened, for example, at Furze Chase, and it worries me. But some items are not for me to investigate, but are for the police to follow up on. So I do take their information seriously. I do follow it up, and going forward, we have trained 2 more officers who will be able to carry on investigating and setting up a programme of inspections at various points during the year to follow up on checks to the sites. And I think, I'm sure there's more I've missed, but I think that's it for now, if anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruder. And members, pages 11 to 14 is the report. Any members that would like to speak to the report here, it's quite a detailed one about a bit of history and a bit going forward. We've just heard John Ruder talk about the possibility of making a policy up, to research the idea of a policy being created that says what you can't do. Any members that would like to speak on this item, please? Councillor Buston, did you wave? Yes, Councillor Buston.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much indeed. Let me start by confirming to Councillor Sunnett, who I was pleased to meet at a meeting of the East Mersey Parish Council, that they kindly invited me to speak at, and also to Councillor Acker, who I had not met with his hat on as a West Mersey Parish Councillor. I said at that meeting what I perceive to be the truth of the matter. Number one, no member of our committee or officers have any lack of sympathy or empathy, indeed, with residents' views and residents' concerns. And I think that needs to be underlined and made quite plain. And exactly in the same way that we said effectively the same in the last item to Mr. Mogridge. That's the first point. The second point is that, again, as I said to the East Mersey Parish Council meeting, the whole being of a district authority, and that includes Colchester Borough Council, is governed by statute. That is to say, it is only permitted to do what statute says it may do. It can't make it up as it goes along, and it can't say, look, we'd really like to help these folk because we think they are being hard pressed or they're not being treated fairly, if the law, the statute that governs what the council is allowed to do, does not permit them to do it. And frustrating though it is, and it really, really is frustrating for both residents and their representatives to actually understand and grasp that. And when nothing is seen to happen, it's a very natural thought that nobody's actually taking any notice, nobody's on our side, nobody wants to help. Nothing actually could be further from the truth. The third item, and I'm sure most people know this, but it doesn't do any harm to underline it. There is a legal separation between the planning function of any district authority and planning conditions and the like as may be imposed, or any planning matters, and a licensing function. They are two completely separate things, and it is imperative that they are not muddled up. Again, it's very natural to muddle them up, and it's very natural to say, well, how are you allowed to do this here and not allowed to do it there, and vice versa? They must not be confused. Going to the issues, and over the last years, I've had close contact with Mersey councillors, particularly Councillor Moore, who's brought these matters to our attention on a number of occasions for the residents. The evidence that has been supplied circumstantially is compelling, and it does show that there are items that residents really are right to be upset about. But the evidence needs to be fitted in with what the council is allowed to take action upon. It is quite possible, as indeed the licensing officer said, that some of the items really are solely the province of the police. The council is not allowed to enforce where the police are, particularly where there are threats of intimidation, which I have seen by the circumstantial evidence as has been provided to us. But the police have to deal with that. We are not allowed to deal with that. We cannot make that up as we go along. So there is no lack of personal interest on the behalf of either officers or councillors. There is no lack of willingness to help. In order to try and do that, we would suggest, or would put it to the committee, there are two ways forward that could be explored in the future. One of those, I would suggest, is to try and put together what I would call a community engagement group, a community engagement protocol, with stakeholders from the various interested parties here, both parish councils, residents, and also borough council officers who have to deal with this, the police, because they have to deal with this, the site owners in particular, and the residents of the parks. Because somebody said a long, long time ago, jaw is better than war, and that must be a sensible way forward to be considered. Nonetheless, it is something that is voluntary. you can't force people to do this, but it is a way forward that might let everybody know where they are, know what they can do, and try and come to better accommodations. And it may well be, for example, that if site residents are causing residents in the locality difficulties, or are not, shall we say, behaving as perhaps others think they might, by bringing it to such a forum with representatives, including the site owners, to know that these items are being clocked and other people are getting a bit humpy about it, then it may well be that some better results are achieved. Because at the moment, it's just heading one way, and it's not a very good way that it's heading. We need to try and find some way out of this. The ultimate item in that, of course, is the warning that I think Mr. Ruder has given to caravan site owners on a number of occasions, that they have to stay within the bounds of their licenses, and if they don't, then he will act. But sadly, the occasions when he's allowed to act are few and far between. That's why it's important to get the police involved as well as the site owners. And lastly, we suggest that it would be a good plan to consider researching into the construction of a policy, a formal policy that the council, if it is appropriate, could adopt towards static caravan sites. I don't believe that such a policy exists at the moment. It would take some time to produce this because, frankly, the licensing officers who would have to produce it would have to do a lot of research. It would take a lot of time to do this, a lot of investigation, a lot of seeing if anybody else does it and how they do it. But I think that also could be a way forward to let people know what they can do, what they cannot do, and exactly how and where and why officers will be able to act, and will, if they see a breach of the licensing conditions. I think I ought to cut off there because otherwise nobody else will get a word in edgeways. But thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I hope that's helpful, and I hope that the residents through the parish councils can be assured that this council is on their side. We do understand what they're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buston. You seem to be along the same wavelengths as Licensing Manager John Ruder was saying. The two things I bring the committee's attention to is the fact that pages 11 to 14 does spell out exactly what action has been taken over the last year or two. And I have to thank the officers, bearing in mind that COVID has affected us all in a very adverse way. And looking at the number of inspections that have happened down there is absolutely amazing. So thank you for that. And I also note 6.8 that 2 licensing officers have been trained regarding caravan sites, and they'll be following up with inspections over the coming months. That ought to be communicated to the site owners, which I think is a good step. I'm now going to, members, do 2 things. I'm going to invite Councillor Moore to speak because she's got a hand up, and then I'm going to give Councillor Acker and Councillor Sinnott the chance to have their 60 seconds if they wish to take it. They don't have to after that. So Councillor Moore first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite a complicated issue. I've got in front of me here the record of action by the officers, and it's certainly they have been busy. I am concerned on the list of suspected number of caravans being lived in, 93. Evidence produced of fixed main residence, only 36. That leaves a gap of 57, and yet those that have actually been removed or had their contract terminated is very low. Very low. I can't actually, there's lots of figures, but it is very low. No way goes to fill that 57. And I am quite concerned that it seems that we are stuck somewhere in there, unable to act. I certainly would support creating a policy. I don't know if you saw the correspondence that was sent round. I was totally shocked by the reports that came through from TripAdvisor, and I mean, obviously there were some good ones as well, but the bad ones I think are really quite shocking. And I wonder if when we're forming our policy, we ought to have some sort of standards written into there that, if there is a history of people behaving badly and ruining for other people, that, my feeling is this is not the sort of business we ought to be encouraging and supporting on the islands if this is in fact the sort of behaviour. I know for a fact that they are very unsafe places to be sometimes. My daughter's wedding, friends hired a caravan. She had the wedding at East Mersey. They hired a caravan at Cooper's Beach, and they all had their cars keyed along the side for no good reason, just pure vandalism. I have to say, it gives the place a very murky reputation. As I say, I'm quite upset about that. And I do think that if it's in our power to ask for certain standards of behaviour on these sites, we should be able to build it into the policy if it's within our power to do that. Yeah, I'm glad that the mention of people registered the doctors was mentioned. I've got 65 registered the doctors. John Acker says it's a bit more than that. What bothered me was when we had a planning application to change a touring site into a fixed site, it was mentioned about the strain on the community, and we were told by planning officers that there was absolutely no evidence of these people being registered as the doctors, which I'm afraid was frankly untrue. And it does bother me that there's this sort of confusion, and it's no wonder the public get upset and think their concerns are not being taken seriously when planning applications are decided on facts that are frankly don't exist. I'm also deeply bothered that the part 2 of the local plan is to encourage, it seems to encourage the expansion of sites. Now, the communities, East and West Mersey, are horrified because they feel they have quite enough bother with what's going on already, and we don't want that. Now, I know that's a planning issue, but it all sets the scene and why I think it's so important that we do get a handle. I do thank John for the work that he's done and is trying to do, but the general impression, and I know what Roger says is true, absolutely true from a legal point of view, which goes a long way to what we can and can't do. But it's the general impression is that too little, too late, and that this has been going on for years, and it's only since the opportunity of COVID to actually identify people who are still on site, and lots of pushing and shoving from the public that anything is being done. I'm glad it's being done, but I think we need to do more. And we, as I say, what sort of a policy we can put together and what sort of power it will have behind it. But we really, really do need, as an organisation, to feel that we're responsible for something we are proud of and not ashamed of. We are giving these licenses, and therefore they should be licenses that we can say, that's good. It's no good if we're giving them reluctantly and then, oh dear, we can't do anything about it. It's our job as councillors, as a CBC councillors, we should be getting to grips with the whole concept. In many ways, not just leaving it to John and his team to try and clear up a mess that is not actually of his making. So I'll stop there. I feel very strongly about the whole thing. I think please, let's try and do something lasting for this. Thank you.
Councillor Moore, that was very good, very helpful. Thank you. I've now got 3 other hands. Mr. Ruder, Councillor Lilly, and Mel Rundle. I was going to give the two have your say speakers the last 60 seconds, but do you want to come in before there, Mr. Ruder?
Yeah, I just think there needs to be a follow-up on a few pointers. The numbers in the report where it says 93 and 36, there is an asterisk against 25. That's because I will be returning to that site to follow up on the evidence that was put before me that I wasn't satisfied with in order to see where these people are residing. If you follow along the numbers, then the numbers go into the report below, show you where the rest of that 96 come from and what the actions have been taken accordingly. Standards, I'm afraid that the license doesn't allow that. There are statutory standards which it is set down under the 89 statutory standards for caravans, and they purely relate to amenities, site layout, numbers, gas, fire, electrics, etc. There's nothing in there that talks about behaviour of people, so we can't really add something in there that's not allowed to be added to that license. Obviously I do have the residency bit on the license. Any conditions that we add to it, we would have to go to the magistrates court anyway, and they have the right to appeal against those conditions, any of them that added. In relation to the granting of the licenses, I have no choice. Under the planning, if they are authorised and given planning permission, I have to grant that licence in a set period of time accordingly. And like I said, you can add certain conditions. The behaviour of people on the site, that is and I did have a look at the emails, and I did have a look through all of the complaints that were in TripAdvisor, and the vast majority of them are policy and procedure of the site, and it's the site's duty to manage that issue of behaviour. If it was alcohol related and it was related to the houses that the people can go to for a drink and meals and etc., then yes, if it is proven that there's an issue there, then as the licensing authority under the 4 licensing objectives, we can investigate. However, it doesn't stop people having drink on a caravan site or campsite and behaving badly where they didn't obtain their alcohol from that site. So that would fall without our remit again, but it would fall to the thing. So there's no reason that we're going forward where we talk possibly, I have no problem in contacting the site owners and talking about community engagement and talking about those issues of behaviour. That's something we can approach later on, but I can't put it in the licence. I'm just not allowed to. I hope that clears a few bits up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ruder. Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Once again, Councillor Buston has summed it up exactly right. It must be it's because he's a lawyer and he knows what he's talking about. This is a licensing committee. We're not here to deal with planning committees, local plan committees. It's past our remit, and it's also past the officer's remit. We have to take action. We have to have evidence that will stand up in a court of law to prosecute anybody. And I'm afraid so far all we've got really is circumstantial evidence that there are some cars parked outside, they have gone inside, there's people staying and so on. It's not really going to stand up in a court, which we can't do. Our officers have really pushed themselves in there. There's not many of our officers. We've had the whole COVID situation to deal with over the last year, which has been a massive amount of work. They've had to visit over 500 licensed premises, and on top of this issue as well. We understand it's frustration for the people down in Mersey because you're caught up in a huge web where you've got the policy of a caravan park is not being held up. That's got nothing to do with us. It's to do with them. If there's antisocial behaviour on that site, it should be reported straight away to the police, and they should investigate those issues. And if they feel it's related to a licensing issue, then they'll come back to us and speak to officers about it. And that's where we are stuck. I'm happy with the work that the officers have done and gone out and beyond in the time that we've had. And of those 90 odd people that in that caravan park, and only 22, only a few seem to be provided evidence. I understand 22 of that number were allowed to stay under the new COVID rules. and the other few will be revisited again and asked for their information. If they don't provide their information, then I have every confidence in our officers will take action against that. But it's incredibly hard work to gather the real evidence that we need. And I understand they're all getting frustrated, but please, let's get the evidence together and all work together. And as Councillor Buston suggested, which is a really good idea down there, they should take up his offer of that suggestion to do it, and we'll be happy to get involved in that as well.
Thanks to Councillor Lilly. And I've got Mel Rundle, the Safety and Protection Manager. She wants to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, everybody. I'm Safety and Protection Manager, so I oversee John and his team. And just a few brief points about some of the things you've made. Obviously, in terms of the policy, absolutely support the officers putting together a policy, because I think that will set out our approach as a local authority. And one of the things we could look to do within that policy is to state what our approach is. So a bit similar to our police colleagues, they have a 4E approach: engage, explain, encourage, enforce, or I might have got that in the wrong order, but we could certainly adopt an approach as a local authority of how we'll deal with caravans and caravan owners. In terms of the behaviour, as John has said, absolutely, we'd love to do an acceptable behaviour, but it's not within our gift to do that. However, in terms of some of the complaints we received, if there is noise at that site, I manage the environmental protection team, so please do report through any noise issues, because we can deal with that under the Environmental Protection Act. If there's any reports of drunkenness that can be attributed to the clubhouse or whatever, absolutely we can look at dealing with that under the 4 licensing objectives. So from that perspective, if we've got clear signs, we can take action. In relation to the GP information, I'm not sure where that comes from, but that's not something we've ever been previously made aware of. I know if you're on holiday and you're taken ill, you do have access to GP surgeries, because I myself have been unfortunate enough to be in that situation on holiday in Great Yarmouth one time. In relation to the TripAdvisor information, I have to say I do think that's subjective. When we received the information, I went and looked on TripAdvisor, and I have to say I went through 5 pages of positive reviews before I reached a negative review. So I think there is a balance to be struck there. So I think that's all the points covered. But as I say, my only ask would be that if we agree, and I think we have agreed that we'll put a policy in place, the officers are extremely busy with COVID. So my plea would be, please don't give them a 4-week deadline to achieve that. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Now, members, the way I summarise that, we've had some very good suggestions there about a local forum involving the owners of the caravan camps, the borough councillors, the parish councillors, to meet, even though it may be by Zoom, to talk about issues. And I think that's very productive and very helpful. There's talk about a policy, which I very much support, but we've just been appealed to say, don't make it in the next month or 2. Manage our expectations. COVID is here, and we may be coming out the other side, we all hope. But we've got to make sure we give our officers time to do that and research whether it's possible to make a policy which will be engaged with everybody, not just borough councillors, but parish councillors and individuals as well. So that will be very positive. And then I'm going to now hand over to I'm hoping that Councillor Sunnock and Councillor Acker are satisfied, but I'll ask Councillor Sunnock first if he wants to have 2 seconds words before
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Councillor Moore is indicating. I don't know if you've...
Councillor Moore, your second bite of the cherry.
Thank you. Sorry about that. It was talking about, it was the mention about facilities. And in fact, there is a quote on Cooper's Beach on the 8th of the 8th, 2018, facilities not sufficient for the amount of people on site. Now, do we know that since, because all these sites have been, they're enlarged almost year on year, that in fact the facilities keep up with the number of, if you've got these park homes and these fixed caravans, they have 8 people at a time in these. It's a very, very crowded setup. So can those be checked that the facilities, in fact, I presume they're talking about the lavatories and washrooms, that are in fact up to standard for the amount of people on the sites. I think that's all I wanted to come back on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I think Mr. Ruder wishes to give you a reply.
Cooper's Beach is completely caravan only, so all the facilities will be within the caravans themselves. I can only assume that perception-wise, they are talking about the actual clubhouse being large enough to contain the number of people. Because it is, I think it's the largest caravan site. It has over 500 caravans and they only have 1 clubhouse. It is of a substantial size. It meets all the, the actual site itself meets the amenity standards, so there's nothing we can do there. So I guess I can only assume that perception is about the actual clubhouse itself and whether that is large enough to facilitate that many families being on site.
Thank you, Mr. Ruder. Now, David Sunnox, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for turning up and showing interest in this and representing your residents. So I hope you felt very warmly welcomed here. Do you wish to have a final few seconds say?
Yes, I would very much like to. Thank you very much. But first of all, it was very much appreciated the effort Mr. Ruder has been making on all of this. As I say, perhaps if we had better communication so that the parish council knows what's happening and can report back to the residents what is happening, that would be very positive. I very, very much support having a policy so that everyone is clearer as to what can and cannot happen. And also to have the forum, I think, is a really good idea. And I would fully support that. And to have, obviously, the park owners themselves involved, because we'll probably achieve more by a forum than any amount of policing. Thank you.
Agreed, Mr. Sunnox. Thank you very much. The same preface to you, Mr. Acker. Thank you for showing interest in this item, and I hope you felt warmly welcomed here. Did you want to have a few seconds to close?
Yes, Chair, if I may, can I firstly say a very good discussion, with due respect tonight, of the issues which are involved. Just a couple of points. Yes, to a policy. I very much appreciate that. But I also think that the officer's report and some of the considerations should be reported back to the, we'll do our best to report it back fully, what you've discussed tonight. But I think the council as a whole ought to put out a statement about its activities and what it's doing, because it's had an excellent officer's report. There is a follow-up action which is being taken. So perhaps when that follow-up action is being taken, a report could be issued by the council. And the last point I would make is that you are now dealing with internationally owned private equity companies who are involved in these sites. So I would favour you having discussions with other councils up and down the country about some of the real practical issues which you face on licensing issues. And lastly, the doctors' fixed figures came from the Doctors' Patient Liaison Committee, and I gladly supply you with more details of that if you need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. Mr. Acker and Mr. Sunnock, you'll be asked to leave in a few seconds. And members, I'm going to ask you to note the report, note the recommendations, and I would personally ask as chair that Councillor Moore and Councillor Sunnock, if you would like to report back to us at some time in the future, let us know how a forum is going and whether these steps are in place to create such. I'm sure you'll have a lot of support around the room, officer support, but I think the move needs to be done and fairly quickly, because as Councillor Sunnock said, more will come from that, I think, than a lot. So could I ask for any dissent first of all, in noting this report?
No dissent, Chairman, but would Councillor Buston be in need of a formal seconder to what he's put forward, his proposal to have a two-headed approach, one for the community forum and one for the policy making? If you need a formal seconder, I'm happy to second that. It's Councillor Buston's proposal.
I'll be guided. I think that's okay, Matthew, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair.
Yes, you okay? Did you want to propose that, Roger? You're muted.
Sorry, I have to excuse me. I'm not on my normal computer. Yes, I'm happy to propose that, and I think thank you, Councillor Hogg, for introducing that suggestion, because then that sort of underlines, if you like, the committee's commitment to trying to assist the parish councils and residents with the direction of travel in relation to this.
Absolutely.
The participation of the site managers, as was mentioned, is crucial in this. And if you can get them aboard, and frankly, it's got to be voluntary, but it needs to be, they need to be shown that it's in their interests to be aboard, then as Councillor Sunnock says, it will actually prove probably more useful than anything else we can possibly do. Thank you.
So I've got a proposal and a seconder. Any dissent on that, members? Do I need to have a vote on it? It looks like not. There's no dissent. I take that as carried then, Matthew, please.
Yes, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Acker and Councillor Sunnock, if you could leave now, you'll be able to watch the rest on YouTube. Very welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, members, for that. I'm now going to take you back to item 5. The reason I didn't do the minutes earlier on is because we had members of the public and other councillors here, and I wanted to make sure we gave them due credit. So I'm now going to go back to item 5 to invite the committee to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November 2020. Do I have any dissent, first of all? Matthew, there was nobody dissenting. I take that as an agreed for the minutes of the 11th of November 2020.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
I hope you agree with my actions there. I didn't want to keep our guests waiting any longer than necessary. I know it only took a few seconds, but there. So item 8, members, the street collection policy review. And I invite the licensing officer, who has been very busy tonight, to carry on to present the report.
So, sorry, Councillor, I'm not sure if that's me or John, but I'll pick that one up. Apologies for the delay there. There isn't too much to say on this matter. We have reviewed the Council's collections policy, which covers both street collections and house-to-house collections. But little has changed since the last adoption in 2014. So the changes that come before members tonight are largely to reflect working practice changes. We've strengthened the wording around house-to-house collections and the times they can take place. But I would just mention, if a house-to-house collection has an exemption in place, a national exemption, we're only notified of those collections. There's little we can do about the timing, although we would obviously go back and feedback any adverse comments were they to be found to be collecting out of hours, as it were. We've removed the need for a PNC check for each applicant to focus efforts where we've got a genuine cause of concern. I don't think it's a very good use of the police time to be doing PNCs for every applicant for a house-to-house collection. So we've changed that, and we've just generally given it a bit of a refresh, but there isn't anything really significant to raise, Chairman, but I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, sorry, I should just say, Chairman, actually, sorry, we've noticed there is a spelling mistake in 3.112 with the spelling mistake of manager. We'll correct that on the final version. Thank you.
the document before you, members. I don't seem to have any speakers at the moment. Are you able to agree, or does anybody want to comment on this? Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just propose adoption.
Thank you very much. A seconder? Councillor Buston, thank you very much. All in favour?
In favour, agreed.
Thank you very much. Full assent. Thank you very much, Matthew. So this policy has been approved. Thank you very much. Item 9 is now the statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards. And I invite the licensing officer to present the report. In doing so, I wanted to take special note that it took me 4 times to go through it, looking at all the green and the red ink on there. For those members of the public listening in, those are the amendments, the subtractions, additions. And I note there must have been a huge amount of work gone into this. And I want to thank the whole licensing team for that amount of work, because it took me a while to go through and read every line as I'm expected to. So I'd hope you'd support me in that. Could I ask the licensed officer to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The committee will be aware that we brought a report in November on this matter, identifying where the council's hackney carriage and private hire policy diverged from the new statutory standards. The policy has now been amended to bring it into line with the required standards, and this is the report in front of you. As the report indicates, and because we are having to go out to consultation on these standards, we have taken the opportunity to make some further changes really around the clarity of the policy, and those changes are marked in green. We're suggesting an 8-week consultation on the changes, although I would mention, and I think members are aware, that as these are statutory standards, we've got to have extremely compelling reasons not to adopt them. So although it is a consultation, it is a somewhat perhaps measured consultation, although obviously anything in green is completely up for discussion. So we'll put that out at the appropriate time, given the timing of the election, members. As there are a number of changes, I wasn't going to go through every one, but I'm very happy, as I'm sure is John, to answer any questions on what is contained in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no hands at the moment. Okay, so what we've been asked to do is...
Chair, I'm sorry, Councillor Wood is indicating.
Councillor Wood, thank you. You're muted again. You're muted, Councillor Wood. Sorry, I do that all the time, don't worry.
Sorry about that. Yes, sorry. Yes, under page 87, under the Hackney Carriage Vehicles Licensing Standards and Conditions, there's comments on about trailers, and it notices there are 3 points under there. And then under the private hire licensing standards and conditions, under the trailers, there are 6 points. Now, under most of those, those 2 documents, they're very similar. I wanted to know why there's only 3 points under one and then 6 points under the other.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wood. Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, I'm trying to unmute myself and find the document at the same time. Can you just give me a few minutes, because I haven't got it all up in front of me. So,
yes, thank you. Any other points? Sorry. Any thoughts, members, on the timing of the consultation? Now, obviously, what will happen? This will go out to interested parties. And it will be subject to any restrictions, of course, imposed during the pre-election period that may or may not apply. But it will go out to those that who want to respond, and we all, can't we, as members, licensed committee members, is to encourage people to respond if they've got an interest in this. Are you ready yet, Sarah?
No, I'm just reading. Sorry, Chairman, I'm just reading it. Sorry,
it's not the marked time for you. Sorry.
No, it's to be honest, it's not something that I particularly looked at in terms of this bit of the policy, because it's not a bit that's particularly changed. So this has probably been in place for a while. Sorry, it's in relation to 13.13, and what was the other one, Councillor Wood?
Can I come in, because I've read them both? I think it might be just a little bit of a typo correction where we've copied stuff across, because they apply to both. One section is purely about the advertising, which is slightly different for hackney carriage as it is for private hire. But we can quickly address that and update that. That just might be. I think it might just be a case it's missing.
So there's a slight amendment that has to go on to it before it goes out to consultation. Yes.
That's correct, Councillor.
Well spotted, Councillor Wood.
Yes, and I've also noted a few typing errors as well, which I haven't had a phone call back to speak about those.
That's not Sarah's fault. That's in my defence. I completely forgot to email her, so I do apologise for that.
Sorry, I'm happy to speak to Sarah anytime if with the adjustments.
I do value that, Councillor Wood. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chairman, could I?
Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just raise a point on 1.12 on page 62? Just for my information, we're talking about they must submit an enhanced DBS every 6 months. Is that the norm across the country for drivers now, or is that just something we're coming in line with? Because I can see issues arising out of this.
Yeah, that's the big change, Councillor. One of the biggest things under the new statutory standards is that all drivers and operators will have to supply, and proprietors as well now, will have to supply us a DBS every 6 months. All drivers 6 months, proprietors will be a yearly thing, but they will have to do it as a standard. That is across the country.
Good. That's you've answered the question I wanted to know. I didn't want to put us in a situation where we were different from other local authorities and that could be pointed out and used against us. So as long as we're conforming with the government standard, I'm very happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. So subject to the amendments that Councillor Wood has very helpfully suggested, and the dialogue that will happen to make sure that a couple of typos are put right, are we content, members, to adopt this policy?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, members. I see no dissent, Matthew. That's unanimous because I'm voting as well, obviously, with it. Thank you very much, members. Item 10, I'll hand over to Matthew M. Davis to present the report.
Thanks, Chair. This is the last report. This is the last meeting of this committee for this municipal year, and most of the business has been dispensed with now that was on the work programme. The only thing I draw members' attention to is that there was a proposed review of the council's sex establishment policy, was due to be considered at this meeting, but that's been pushed forward to a future meeting of the committee. So it will come back to you at a future date, and that will be something that will be established with the next work programme for the forthcoming municipal year, which you'll be asked to agree once meetings are up and running again following the election. Other than that, I've no comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I have no other items except to say that before I end this meeting, that you've been a wonderful team to work with through this year, through trying circumstances. Nonetheless, different meetings online and from the council to chamber to here online, and you've been a pleasure to work with. So thank you very much from myself. Any other closing comments?
Thank you, Chairman, for your professionalism.
Thank you very much, members. I therefore close the meeting bang on 7:30. We didn't need